the science, right? By perpetuating lies or perpetuating things that are not true, like we endanger ourselves and others, because that means that others will probably not be able to get the best care possible if we like choose to disagree with it and choose to reject it. I'd like to pass it on to Luke now.
Yeah, thank you. And some objections we saw is that like generally we would like to keep like a family together, right? Like by disagreeing with a family member, perhaps like we're also like scuffling the whole family and generating animosity between them. And this really challenges our point, because like with public health, we see like there is an impact on someone not being vaccinated, right? But there's like a very visible impact on seeing like the animosity between a family and like seeing those bonds break, right? And another potential objection that we saw against our argument was that perhaps like with there could be like religious reasons behind not being vaccinated. Like it could be, and when I say religious, I mean because the person like in your family could tie their belief into their identity, right? And they could actually take your disagreement with an attack on their character, right? And this like really challenges our point, because perhaps we now are considering whether it is worth it to lose a whole relationship, like having the potential to lose the relationship with a family member over the potential benefits of like them being vaccinated and just being honest with them. And to synthesize, I'd like to pass it back to Sean.
Right. So in order to synthesize these two like conflicting arguments, right? So one thing we have to consider is just weighing this clash between like wanting to keep our duty to our families and wanting to keep the peace and keep everyone happy in that regard, and our duty to society as a whole, our civic duty to make sure that correct and informed opinions are out there and that everyone is being healthy, right? And we have to acknowledge that family is incredibly important, and a large amount of the population considers it the most important relation and the most important thing in their lives, especially like to people, while like society, like to individuals, is highly important. But public health is also important because it affects your other relationships as well that might be just as valuable as family. And one thing we can't ignore is the fact that people who have dangerous opinions and misinformed about health, that also affects their own well-being, right? You're concerned about their safety, and that's a major thing to consider, as well as the fact that a lack of public health also affects your other relations, your friends, your coworkers. So ultimately, we have to go beyond this scope, because while public health, it fights against family, but it also, affects your other relations. And then finally, to look at this like meaning like between like love and relations, right? While keeping the peace is important, like honesty and conflict resolution is just as important, and like being able to like keep all your opinions and your disagreements with your family hidden and to have to keep them sheltered is not as great. Well, I mean, like a healthy relationship would see those, be able to come out, be able to talk about them, being able to healthily disagree and challenge, say, here's like, I think your opinion is really dangerous and then may not be good for you or others, and be able to correct them on that in a healthy way. It comes from a place of love and concern, so we think the challenge of them is actually the best thing you could do for your family. So ultimately, public health is different because it's a case that affects not only the individual's health, but society as a whole, who we all have a duty to. So in order to balance our obligation to ourselves, to our family, to society as a whole, we should challenge them on issues about public health because it is such a pressing concern. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We would love to hear what you guys have to see in the commentary.
All right, thank you. Team A has ceded 10 seconds of time. Absolutely. All right. Team B will now have 1 minute to confer on their commentary of Team A's presentation. Only Team B is allowed to speak at this time. Team B, your time begins now. And judges, please note your scores for their presentation. All right. We will now hear our commentary, we will hear commentary on Team A's presentation from Team B. Only Team B is allowed to speak at this time. They will have 3 minutes to present their commentary. I will give you a reminder at 1 minute remaining. As you've decided to work without the timer, at about 10 seconds remaining, I'll come and stand right about here, just so you know you should be wrapping up your last sentence. All right. Your time begins.
Thank you so much, Northern. We really appreciate your analysis into this question. We have a few questions of our own.
So to start, we really appreciated how you focused so heavily on the kind of very applied and tangible aspects of this, but we think just the nature of Ethics Bowl kind of begs for maybe a deeper explanation of some of the moral goods and harms found in this case, and how maybe, although your position we generally agree with and find it to be moral, if you maybe could name or kind of determine some of those.
Yeah, bringing this specifically into moral philosophy and to the issues raised by the moderator's question, we agree wholeheartedly that it's about disagreements, but specifically about moral disagreements. Within those, there would be goods and harms that relate to the topic of public health, which is ultimately about life, happiness, human flourishing would be some of the goods, and then some of the risks would be of that of death and trauma. And we would be looking for specifically like general principles that can be articulated, moral principles, not necessarily perceptions, or religion specifically. Those are factors though, and just ways that those can be applied within that.
Furthermore, we were curious about you isolating public health as being different from other things that we might disagree with, but a lot of your factors that went into the justification of this were very general in regards to tensions between family and relationships, which might come up with any other disagreement. So what is the real defining factors which separate this from other matters?
We acknowledge that one factor that you did state was that public health affects everyone. But there are lots of other issues, for instance, things like taxes or national defense that would also affect everyone. So how would you say that public health would differ from these or any other issues that also affect everyone? And would you have any other reasons for why you believe that public health is different besides this statement that it does affect everyone?
Thank you, and with that we'd like to yield the rest of our time.
All right, well done. Team B has ceded 45 seconds of time. Team A will now have 1 minute to confer on their response to Team B's commentary. At this time, Team A is the only team allowed to speak. Your time begins now. And judges, please note your score on Team B's commentary, please. All right, Team A will now have 3 minutes to respond to commentary. They have chosen to have a timer, but I will still give a reminder at 1 minute remaining. Again, Team A is the only team allowed to speak at this time. One at a time, please. And your time begins now.
Thank you. All right, thank you for your commentary. Those were like really great insights, and I hope we can develop our case further at this time. So one thing that you brought up is generally just to ask us to look more into like the deeper like conceptual ideas about moral harms and goods, and that was a very great question because yes, most of it was we looked at the circumstances of how relationships look like and what public health looks like within our society. It is also very important to recognize the concepts behind that. So we can just like name a couple that we found really important to our case here to just clarify on those positions. And the one is honesty as a moral principle, right? And like in dealing with relationships as well as like dealing with the government, just keeping honesty within our hearts, because one, it allows for more truth to be out there, to share your opinions and like to this dissemination of facts that might be beneficial, as well as healthier relationships, as we talked about how like being more transparent and being more open with your family members can lead to healthier disagreements and like just better relationships. Another thing is just the ethical impact of harm reduction, like the harm principle, just wanting to minimize that as much as possible, and that how that acts as an obligation as well in this case, right? Is because while you may have a duty to your family, we also want to look at just generally you may be hurting others if you allow them to keep their dangerous opinions. And ultimately, we also want to a reasoning for why we focus so much on the practical side of it is like, you know, looking at it through ethics of care, like we want to talk about like, you know, keeping every like just like happiness and feelings as a virtue as well. And that is something that we address is like just generally in the antithesis especially is how can we like try to maintain healthy relationships and keep everyone happy, because that is also really important, especially in a debate like this. Do you want to go?
Yeah, something maybe beyond that we didn't consider is like how important like we value our feelings compared to their feelings, right? I mean, like for us it was like easy to discount like perhaps like the our family members were like, okay, well they're wrong in their opinion, but like with the identity perhaps like yeah, like you're right, like maybe it is tied, like their feelings to their disagreement is just as important as our feelings to our agreement. And then like we came to like how do we balance that, and perhaps like yeah, like it is difficult because now we have to say like yeah, like even though their feelings are just as important as ours, like we do have to put the foot down at some point, and it does require us to like step in with the family engagement. Yeah.
Another really important question that you guys ask is like what makes public health different from other issues that affect everyone, because a key thing we identify in our case is the fact that this affects society as a whole. So we'd like to expand on that now. Is that it's mainly based in science, and then we don't want to be extremely just like, oh, like you're wrong, you don't believe in science, right? But it's generally true compared to other topics that may like be based more in values or just what you want to see or like what your goals are or what you think might happen. Public health is something that's very immediate, and then it's very like direct, and it's very based on just like what will happen. And some people have opinions that might be really dangerous, or just beliefs that might be really dangerous. Another thing we have to recognize is that public health benefits from the more people that buy in, right? Some policies and some opinions just require like, you know, that's just what can happen in our society. But for public health to really work, for our society to be healthy, we need as many people as possible like understanding how it works and then buying in to be able to play their part. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Good timing. All right. We will now move into the question and answer period of our round. Judges, you would like some time to confer and note your scores for this round? All right. I figured as much. All right, judges, we're ready to go. All right. I know that I think we're gonna briefly go over the rules of the Q&A here quickly. So each judge will be allotted about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Around the 3 minute and 20 second mark, I'm gonna come and stand in front of the table just to let you know that we should be moving on to the next judge. Having been a judge and a competitor, I know that you wanna keep talking, but I've also ended up in a situation where I had 1 minute to ask and have my question answered. So to avoid that situation for any of you here today, because I'm sure that you ladies have very valuable insight to add to these cases, we will try and be a bit stricter about making sure that we are staying on those 3 minute and 20 second intervals. All right, who is going to go first for us today? Linda? All right. There you go.
Thanks for a good presentation. I'm going to do something a little bit different I've never done before, but I'm going to draw your attention to the case, actually. And I want you to look at paragraph 2, if you have it in front of you. In the very center of it, do you all have copies? Yeah? Good. In the very center is a sentence that begins, but public health discussions regularly involve, and here's what I want to highlight, challenging and intersecting issues. And then it's followed by this list of issues: personal safety, social responsibility, care for others, public authority, and trust in expertise. Right? important issues. But what I find, and apologies to the developers, notably absent is the concept of common good. And that concept seems to be disappearing in our daily conversations as we become more polarized. The contribution to the betterment of our society as a whole. You touched on it, but I want to ask you to zero in on that. How much weight should we give the common good when we make decisions around public health?
Okay, so thanks. That's a really good question. What we think you're getting at, is kind of the battle between concepts like maximizing good and other concepts like autonomy and rights, which is important because like what values we have towards public health, are salient to this discussion.
Yeah, so I would like to respond to this question and hopefully get a follow-up question afterwards. To us, to my understanding, it's somewhat of an obligation to aiding society as a whole, as you described. And we would definitely say that everybody has an obligation to aid society as a part of the social contract of living within a society. In the same sense, everybody has that obligation because of the fact that other people are doing it. They want to benefit you under the premise that you will benefit them in return. Vaccines, scientifically, they do not give you immunity to a disease for a long period of time. The point of it is that a large number of the population takes the vaccine so that the virus will die out or lose how common it is as a strain, right? And this is what is key to this is that a lot of people have to get the vaccine to be able to do this. So yeah, 100% common good does come into educating your family members. As a society, we need to work as a team to solve these health issues. I'd like to pass it on to my teammate now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think we value that a lot more. But also, perhaps like the wording of common good is vague on purpose, because perhaps like as a society we also value like familial bonds and such. And while I definitely agree like the value of public health care like supersedes that, perhaps like as a society it's also important like that we recognize that like, yeah, it's important like we all are sequestered in families and have like a private life and a public life, like because we do influence the public life, but it's important like that we still have that connection to our families.
Yeah, so to build off of what my teammates are saying and to bring it back into the case more specifically about families, I think like the concept of common good and recognizing it is also really important against protecting against tribalism, right? And that's also why we chose to kind of concede a bit on the side of like sticking with your family for the sake of like the good of society as a whole. Like bringing back like common good into the foreground into discussion rather than this idea of me and mine. Like I'm only going to side with my family. I'm only going to protect my family. I don't really care about people who I don't really know, right? It's this idea that like, why should I get vaccinated for others? I think recognizing the importance of common good is an important factor in this. Thank you for your question.
Yes, next judge is going to be.
Thanks so much. So in that list that Linda just mentioned, I want to touch on trust and expertise. So what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic is a mistrust and lack in confidence in government and public health, which makes the receptiveness to this information decreased, lowered. So I want us to think about what is the moral duty of trusted people within their friend circles, within their family ecosystems to step up and be that trusted source of information. We saw a lot of folks be conscripted into public health even though they didn't have that expertise. And should public health officials and governments be the front line, the first people to disseminate information in a setting like a pandemic where there is a health threat?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, it's difficult because like with the COVID-19 pandemic, like it was so like it has such a far reach that like people start to lose faith in the the public system, and it's difficult now because if we want public health officials to like tell people to get vaccinated and whatnot, perhaps it like has a negative effect and people like lose even more faith in them. And so now ask the question like, who do we decide to trust? And like the real issues here, like how do we suppress fear in society about vaccines? And this is like agreeably like it's correct to get vaccinated, and now it's touchy because we really want people to have their own like private thinking about like what like personal autonomy and agency, but at the same time we do want to like make sure like they're not fearful and like have that. Yeah.
It's like to expand on that, like the importance of like of trust, right? This idea of like, if they don't trust in expertise, then how can we get them to do so? And I think this goes back to something Luca brought up in the antithesis about how it affects like kind of their opinions about public health may be tied to their identity, which it often is. Like some people, as we like one of the cases that got taken out about culturally sensitive healthcare, is like some people have a real justification to be mistrustful of the public health system, especially historically marginalized communities that have genuine reasons to believe that, or just people who feel alienated by the way the elitist seeming kind of nature of these public health, these doctors in suits coming and talk to you, right? And in that way, it's kind of tied to their identity. It's why it's so important to have family members to be able to communicate those ideas to them, rather than just saying like, okay, well, you should listen to this guy, he's on the news, right? Being able to actually sit down face to face with someone, say, I understand your situation because I'm in your family, being able to reason with them to be able to establish these facts and establish consensus is really important to like making everyone believe in public health and get on the same page.
Yeah, another thing that I thought was interesting was you asked, like, should governments be the trusted officials? And while initially I think yes, I think it's also important that we do have to question things. I think, like, we should even question our trusted officials, but that doesn't mean that we should be, like, so skeptic so as, like, instantly disregard anything they say. I think just, like, if you're being told something, it's, like, you want to question, you want to make sure it's true. But you also want to be able to, like, balance that with, like, if they're providing enough proof, you want to be able to say, like, okay, yeah, that's enough proof, and I do agree. I have to go. Yeah. I think we do need
Yeah, if I could add something really quickly, I just wanted to mention up on a topic that we discussed actually yesterday in a presentation that was given, and it's practically the question of whether or not the populace have an obligation to question authority which has not earned our trust. And to this, I would say 100% yes, but nonetheless, I would still say that the current health system has earned our trust as people dedicate their lives to the betterment of society. That is the point to an extent of public health care individuals, but it would be greatly detrimental if individuals did not question authority, for example, politically in a democracy and stuff like that. So to us, they are taking it a little bit too far nonetheless. But thank you for the question.
Thank you. So, hi there, Team A. So, your team suggested that we have an obligation to engage in dialogue with our families. In particular, I think you suggested that most of us have an in with our families, more than we might have with strangers on the street, right? However, it seems that this isn't the relationship everyone has with their family. Many families are deeply stratified by age, by gender, by deference to authority, that being older members of our family. And so many of us don't have that sort of influence within our family structures. So I'm wondering if you might be interested in amending your position to a certain degree to suggest that we have an obligation to engage in dialogue in situations where we feel like we have a voice, where we feel like we're on somewhat even footing with those around us, or if you truly believe that we do have an obligation to have this dialogue with our families, regardless of our relative position to them and how we think our voice will be heard.
Thank you for your question, because it actually conflicts with like how we traditionally see families and strangers. Like traditionally, we think family is close and strangers is far. But perhaps if you engage in intellectual conversation with a stranger in the subway, you both have this in, and you can actually have like a great influence over them. And like, as you said, like with a family member, like perhaps like they actually are disagreeable with you, and like they want to listen to you. So now we have to figure out how we actually navigate that, because like there is only one family you are born with, and like that is that natural in. So how do we like find perhaps another one, right?
So like this question of like, it's a really important thing to recognize. So thank you for your question that like not all families are the same, right? And this is something that we did consider as well. Like the way I characterize this case initially is like the uncle you only see at Thanksgiving who disagrees about this. It's not like your mom who you're very close with, right? And that's like an important thing as well. And that raises a question of practicality. Like how much can you actually do? Like if your family dynamics are very different, like say you're a younger person in the family, one that values like age, or you're just not very connected to this person, you're not very familiar or close with them, right? There's a question of like how much can you actually change their mind? So that in the question, like we have to like kind of redefine our issue of family, right? I think family in this case just remains close relations. You can apply many of the same concepts we talked about during our presentation to very close friends as well in the same idea. At the same time, there may be family members who are technically your family, but you don't know very well. So I think the importance there is like the closeness of connection, the ability to actually change their mind that makes it so effective. Thank you for your question. I'd like to concede our time.
Okay. Thank you. That was something we really argued about. Sorry for eating up some. We argued about like almost the exact same thing.
Okay. Judges, please note your scores total for this round as we have, or not for the whole round, just for the first half of it, as we have completed the first half of our round. Well done, Team A and Team B. Congratulations on your commentary. We are now going to move into the second period of our round. Please collect any paper that doesn't have anything written on it. Anything that sorry, anything that does have paper that has words on it, I need. Paper that doesn't, you can keep, but I will have to verify. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'll make sure to keep them. And then I just need to see both sides of all of the sheets that you have left here. Thank you very much. If you want to use it as scrap, you can. I just need to make sure it's next to side that you aren't going in with notes. No problem. Alrighty.
I like this policy.
It is nice, hey, because it almost it really forces you to reset your thinking and prepare for now to prepare and present your own case. And having been a competitor, I know it's like it's nice to have almost like your slate wiped clean, and it's like, okay, we're moving into a new round. And I think the two cases have similar moral principles to consider, but at the end of the day, it's something different. So it's nice to have a clear ground to start.
Yeah, I was gonna say in Ontario, like we go to a match and they just sit down and write everything before the match starts.
Which is so crazy to me.
It's a competitive advantage.
Yeah, TV is a huge advantage.
We don't have any going like praying to be team B.
Which is so crazy because it's almost like it really depends on the cases, but that puts you in a position where it's like, well, we need to be team B, whether or not that case is more that is better for us to present, and you end up then not aiming for what's going to work best for your team, but just then having to choose team B because then at least you get some time.
Yeah, we've had a difficult time.
Yes, yeah, it's a good equalizer that's a good word to use to clear the table.
We've had a difficult time like adapting to the new format, but like this is like the one rule which I think like is just so low.
I don't mind the judge press one. It's pretty much.
Yeah, no, it's just like somewhat
It's better. Like different moderators do it differently. I like that.
No, this is like a mix.
Yeah, we get an extra 20 seconds.
I just have always run my rounds exactly like I played them, and so.
No, the 3 minute 20 thing is good because now it is somewhat segmented.
Yeah.
That's what we have in Ontario.
Yeah. That's why I try it. And like I said, it is really about the fact that at the end of the day, I've ended up in situations as a competitor and as a judge where the last judge has like a minute left.
Right.
And it really is annoying because it's like, but I have something to say, and that question adds value to the conversation. And a lot of the time, when you have a Q&A question that takes 5 minutes, a good chunk of those 5 minutes is people just rambling and saying nothing. And so it's better to cut you off before you start saying nothing and move on to add more valuable information to the conversation.
Moderator that everyone wants.
Exactly. All right. We are now going to move on to Case 8. The title being Public Health Measures on Farms. This case will be presented by Distributed Learning, and your moderator question is as follows. Should we do more to publicly recognize the role of the farm industry in pandemic prevention efforts? Again, should we do more to publicly recognize the role of the farm industry in pandemic prevention efforts? Team B will now have 2 minutes to confer on their presentation. Your time beginning now. All right. Team B now has 5 minutes to make their presentation. Only Team B is allowed to speak at this time, one at a time. I will give reminders at 3 and 1 minutes remaining. And like I said last time, we'll come and stand about the side of the table with about 10 seconds remaining, just so you know you should be wrapping up your last sentence. And judges, please remember that we're scoring for Team B. Your time starts now.
Thank you so much. We're just very happy to be here at the at the round before hopefully semifinals, and are really looking forward to dive into the moderator's question: should we do more to publicly recognize the role of the farm industry in pandemic prevention efforts? So whenever we look at this question, we want to focus specifically: should we do more to publicly recognize the moral role of the farm industry in pandemic prevention efforts? With a question like this, it is very applied to a specific case and project, but we would like to expand to try and find moral principles, general principles that can be used within this. So we do not expect to find this immediately. Instead, we are going to, through this presentation, consider goods and harms within this to hopefully arrive at something we can use.
Thank you, Thomas. Now, to examine factors of the good, the one that seems the most pertinent, or the few that seem the most pertinent within the moderator's question, are goods of knowledge and goods of truth and spreading truth. Now, by showcasing to the public, to the Canadians that are in our country, that these different parts of Canada have an important role in pandemic prevention efforts and are doing their important part alongside the citizens who are very publicly always encouraged to do things like wearing masks. It shows that all parts of Canada are a cohesive whole in aiming towards preventing further pandemics and preventing the harms from pandemic, which creates a more cohesive Canada and a further spread of knowledge, which is always good in these further efforts. Now, to pass this along to my colleague Micah for a further analysis of this question.
Thank you. So we certainly do believe that the intrinsic goods of knowledge and truth are very valuable goods, and we would seek to promote these. However, we must also look at a couple of the harms. One such harm that particularly seems to stand out would be the harm of dishonesty. If the knowledge that we are spreading is not in fact the truth, then it would be a moral harm to be spreading this knowledge, and we should not be doing so. This would enable a constraint on publicly recognizing roles if the recognition and the knowledge that we are spreading is not, in fact, the truth. This would mean that we would have the duty to not be spreading these dishonest things even if this might partially be reducing the goods of knowledge. And now to pass it on to my colleague Dominic.
Thank you, Micah. So, having looked at the more generalized goods and harms that Thomas brought up, as opposed to the applied things in this case, the good of knowledge and of honesty in a way, and we looked at the harms of disinformation and, in pertinence to dishonesty, and kind of to focus more on the moderator's question and the applied case that it covers, we can look at this harm of disinformation and waste. A critic to our argument might say that the moral good of knowledge overbears this, and because we have a responsibility to distribute the knowledge we have in a way that is absolute. However, we think that in this case, to answer the moderator's question, should we do more to publicly recognize the role of the farm industry in pandemic prevention efforts, the harm of waste of resources and time and disinformation in this would constrain us to answer the question by saying we should only do more to publicly recognize the role of the farm industry in pandemic prevention efforts in the case that it is clearly pertinent to these pandemic prevention efforts.
All right, so within this, we analyze the various moral tensions within the case and the various factors such as knowledge and truth, then also between promoting things that are not the truth, and disinformation by extension. So we ultimately answered that we should only promote these if it's clear, as these ultimately morally correspond to also the goods of safety in terms of what the farm industry would have helped within this specific case, pandemic prevention efforts and by further safety. So that's a bit of further discussion we'd like to hopefully have along the rest of this case. And with that, we'd like to yield our time.
All right, well done. You have conceded 20 seconds of time. All right. Team A will now have 1 minute to confer on their response to presentation and their commentary on Team B's presentation. Only Team A is allowed to speak at this time. Your time begins now. And judges, please take this time to note your score to Team B's presentation.
I'm so sorry.
All right, please find your seats, gentlemen. All right. Team A now has 3 minutes to present their response to Team B's presentation. I've decided to forego the script because I basically got it memorized, but I do trip over my words sometimes, so I apologize. They will have 3 minutes to present this commentary. They will get a reminder at 1 minute remaining, and only Team A is allowed to speak at this time. Your time begins now.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. I thought it was very well done. You guys have clearly a good grip on this case. So I just want to ask a few more. We just wanted to ask a few more questions to see if you guys did that. The first one is like you obviously based your case around a lot of it, this like idea of good and harms, and you did an excellent job. I thought you guys covered both sides like fairly and equally well about both, you know, the goods and the harms. But I just want to ask what was it about this case that made you take that approach to it? Because I used that lens to kind of break it down and see what was going on inside to balance those two. So what was it specifically about this case that made that the best approach, and were there any other ones you would have considered? Just like kind of as an aside to that, also as another question is this question of obligations, right? Because the goods and harms weighing of it is a bit more utilitarian, and you guys included principles in it as well. But just the idea of obligation, right? Maybe there's an inherent obligation for farmers to do their role in preventing pandemics, and maybe there's a reciprocal obligation of the public to, you know, give their support to farmers and be and educate themselves about their sacrifices because of what they're giving. So I just wanted you guys to see because that could also be a good or a harm, depending on how you guys look at it. So I just want to see that topic under the lens of your presentation, what you guys have to say about that, because I think you guys have a lot of right things to say.
Yeah, sort of like in connection with what he's saying, this may be kind of a weird question, but I was curious what you guys thought about what our ideas were for the case when we presented and how this may relate to it. The way we thought about it was more that we considered like the farmers doing this as more of a duty, and that we all sort of have this like collective duty to prevent disease prevention, and like everyone kind of just does what they can, right? Like a teacher does different things to prevent diseases than a farmer does, than I do. But in a way, like we do all just prevent diseases to the best of our ability, as that is our obligation. And then in a way, when you said recognizing farmers makes a more cohesive Canada, I'm curious if you think that maybe this could also look as like, if you're like raising others on pedestals above others, even though everyone is doing to the best of their ability, like trying to prevent diseases, right?
No, I'm all right.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think that's it. We'd like to yield our time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sean covered what I wanted to say.
Okay. Team A has yielded a full minute. Team B will now have 1 minute to prepare their response to commentary. Only Team B is allowed to speak at this time. Your time begins now. And judges, please note your score for Team A's presentation. Or sorry, not presentation, commentary. Almost tried to use my pen as a microphone. That's not going to work. All right, Team B will now have 3 minutes to present their response to commentary. I will provide a reminder at 1 minute remaining. Only Team B is allowed to speak at this time, one at a time. Your time begins now.
All right, thank you so much for your questions. We'd like to get to answering them just straight away. So the reason why we took our approach, it's specifically an approach rooted in normative ethics as outlined by Shelley Kagan in his book. We specifically, what this means is that we are looking for general moral principles that people can agree on, which we thought was pertinent to the public part of this case, as in the farm industry is part of the public, so we would be looking for common sense bits that everyone can agree on as relating to the general question of how one should live, and in terms of recognition and honor within those types of relationships. In terms of the duties, we have some expansions on those as well.
To specifically answer your question about obligation and how this would factor into our case, we did in fact mention a bit about what we think are constraint-enabling harms. Constraint-enabling harms mean that we would have to enact some constraints, which could also be called obligations, onto the people and to the goods. And on your question of whether we would consider obligation to be a good or a harm, we don't necessarily think this would be either a good or a harm, as it is more of a result of evaluating the goods and the harms.
To answer your questions about everyone having like a duty in Canada and the harm of raising certain people on pedestals or certain groups on pedestals, your thoughts on the case actually really reflect well upon our own, and we fundamentally agree with your thoughts about everybody having a duty. We just want to raise that bar even further. Now that everybody is doing stuff, people are wearing masks, people are on lockdown, these groups such as the farmers are like having certain having special duties in additional vaccines and additional measures. We want to raise it so that these things are actually known about to the public. If everybody's doing their part, that's wonderful, but if everybody knows that every other group, every other individual is also doing a part in reducing the pandemic, that builds that cohesive Canada that we talked about before.
And just to kind of further on Aidan's point about the collective duty of everyone, as well as pertaining to your question about the obligations of farmers to share their knowledge and resources with others, we just want to further stress the point we brought up about the pertinence of this knowledge and resources and information that the farmers have, because in this case of a pandemic, it's undoubtedly a crisis, and the potential harms of waste and misinformation in this case, like we said before, definitely are very important to look at. And so we need to take this in a very case-by-case basis to prevent any waste and have an effective response to this pandemic.
Yes, finally, to address your point on consequentialism, like consequentialists, we are looking for a...
Not looking for the timer to end is what you aren't looking for, I'm sure. All right. We will now, judges, please note your scores for both commentary and response to commentary, and we will move into our Q&A session. Judges, I will give you a couple minutes to finish your scoring and also confer on your questions. I ask that teams please remain silent at this time. Conferred judges, please just give me a nod to let me know you're ready to start the session. All right, that was a moment. I had one judge's question session where all of them led into each other, and it all worked out nicely.
Okay, great. Thank you, Team B. So you talked a lot about misinformation and disinformation and the value of knowledge, and I want to talk a bit about justice. And I want to ask, if farmers don't receive recognition from the government, they don't receive federal funding, and their efforts to, halt a pandemic aren't recognized at all, do they still have this duty to implement these safety procedures, to cull their livestock, to take these measures?
No, they have to use it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Does anyone want to start out with the duty bit?
So we believe that people do have an obligation to try and help society even if they don't receive the amount of public recognition they deserve. We think that the injustice towards them is certainly a moral harm and is one that should be reduced. However, we wouldn't necessarily say that because they have received this kind of moral harm, they have a right to try and also not promote goods.
In such a case, we'd actually look at different goods and different harms, right? Like in the case of these farmers basically doing this all on their own, we'd feel like they'd have an obligation, maybe not to the Canada as a large right now, but maybe an obligation to themselves in their own safety, right? This case really is underlined by questions of personal safety, about the possibility of harms, right? And beyond just their duty towards knowledge like we've described and the duty towards perhaps honesty and spreading that, in a more secluded case, they have that greater duty towards safety of their families, to their communities, and to themselves.
Ultimately, this question actually really brings attention to the fact that the moderator's question is also asking about the relationships between farmers and public recognition and the public as a whole. So about this specifically, we would want to ensure that that relationship is a naturally healthy one, that there are different steps being taken within those. We can look at different principles by other philosophers, such as like Aristotle on friendship and other cases, where specifically our obligations would depend on reciprocation and on reciprocation of both harms and goods. Sorry, did you ask?
I have a very brief follow-up.
Okay, you have time for a very brief follow-up.
A self-interested farmer wouldn't want to cull thousands of their livestock, no?
Yeah, certainly. So within a friendship, within this, if I'm to continue with the Aristotelian bit, there should be, both people should seek to give each other the greatest good and greatest honor and happiness within that, and also to prioritize within those good can be replaced for general goods such as safety. So a farmer could maybe justify that by prioritizing the greatest safety to the public, although a self-interested farmer may not.
In the case of a self-interested farmer, the bar of constraint might be higher, right? Like it might go, instead of like looking at potential hazards, it might reach the point in which the hazards are right on their doorstep, and that's when they'd be enacted. So the constraint still applies to the good here, but that constraint is just applied at a different time, right? That explains your question.
Yeah, hopefully it does.
Thanks. Thanks. I think you did an exemplary job of wading around in the philosophical realm, doubly so. But I want to bring this right back to practical questions, and I want you to just for a moment erase that mental philosophical whiteboard you have in the back of your head, and don't take me to those lofty places. I want just a really practical answer. What would public recognition look like? In a practical sense.
I mean, one example that comes to mind of public recognition is in education and in who we take into account as a public of who's influencing our education. Because in a pandemic, we saw examples of how education about vaccines and masks and social distancing and all these factors that help to eliminate the pandemic were taken into account from different research and parties. And so we think perhaps in the case that it's appropriate to include the farm industry in these, then that's probably one of the best ways to go about it.
Yeah, a practical example would actually be similar to the pandemic phenomenon of celebrating essential workers. So having like a time, I remember at 7 o'clock when everyone in the neighborhood would go out and ring like pots and pans to celebrate what they were doing. So that could be a really practical, grounded example where we have that sense of public recognition, and these principles can be applied to many applied situations. Sorry for keeping it in the philosophical there.
Furthermore, like, these are like some great examples with the public workers, and these were really sparked by like online movements, first of all, right? Like seeing the work that people were doing and bringing people together. Like, we saw firsthand how much effort, how much like trauma really there was within that health sector when dealing with COVID-19. And if we could just bring that to other groups, right? If we could bring that and show people what these farms are experiencing, what these farmers are experiencing, the losses they're experiencing, having to cull thousands and thousands of their livestock, their own livelihoods, that'll really bring like an emotional connection between people, and then they can support them in that regard.
Yeah, anything else? Does that answer? Okay.
Thanks so much. Again, very rich dialogue. I want to talk about, when we talk about the farming industry, we're talking about it as if it's a monolith. So within that, we've got various groups. We've got large corporate industries. We've got smallholder farmers. We've got migrants who are in precarious work situations. So can you extend your points and positioning to include how the diversity of the farming industry impacts the way you think about public recognition?
Yes, I think I can give a very applied example of at least two of those groups. So my family on my mother's side, they actually came around the Red River and were potato and beet farmers and in a family farm. And my family on my father's side, they engaged in migrant labor. They were migrant workers. So whenever we consider these, we look for, to get back to the philosophical, look at principles that can be applied to what ultimately these different groups want, which is ultimately we are looking for how to live human flourishing and happiness in some case. In a lot of cases, I would say. Everyone wants to have a happy, fulfilled life. So in terms of how we honor that and how we show specifically honor to those people, we could extend those principles and even extend our public perceptions to look beyond maybe just the corporate farms that are producing massive amounts of food, but maybe a little more detached, to family farms, which are taking specific care of their livestock in a family-based way, and then also migrant workers who are maybe more detached from specific farms, but still doing a great deal of the labor. We can extend that honor across all, recognizing the different factors and goods that each of them contributes to that. Anything else? Yeah. Does that answer everything?
Got a minute 30 left. Anyone have a brief follow-up? Minute 30? Okay. Yes, sorry, it's for the live stream.
We're talking about public recognition mainly through kind of media or just amplifying the good and the kind of moral rules. Can we maybe talk about public recognition in the sense of kind of more tangible supports that public health and government should be obligated, or maybe not, depending on your response, to support these farmers and this industry?
Our discussion really has been about recognizing that role, right? That's only the first step, you're right. After we recognize the role, after we see the things that these farmers are doing, it really comes back to us as citizens and even the government as a whole in order to actually support these people on an on-hand basis. So as what we can do for, as individuals, it really pertains to, I guess, the close, the level of familiar roles and close farms that my colleague Thomas was talking about with his with migrant workers, with small local farms that we can assist, or even just buy produce from, as opposed to from imported foods. Do you have on a
Yeah, we can also use these moral principles to change our laws and to help support the rights of farmers everywhere.
All right, and that will conclude our match for today. Thank you, everyone, for a lovely round with some incredible... Yes, please. I love to hear it. It's like a rain stick. All right. Judges, please take this time now to complete your scoring. Linda, just let me know when you've got that paper good to go. Yeah, and teams, you're welcome to come and confer within each other. I ask the audience please stay in their place. So, something that teams, just like a casual attention, if you don't mind. Something that's happening is the Brit Consortium has an artist in the room, and they are taking information about the piece, and they're going to put together an art piece that almost reflects the conversation and what it looked like today. So I'm very excited about this. That's actually why I got switched into this room. So there are some questions here, just casually sort of. What did you guys feel like you learned from this conversation from each other?
Well, if I may ask, where will this be displayed?
Honestly, I have absolutely no idea.
Fair enough. Well, to me,
You'll be able to access it. It'll be on the actual
Yes, that would have been my yes.
Yeah, and also through our website. But you'll get more information once it's finalized.
Yeah.
well, to me, I'd say, to me, I would just say,
Here, I just ask that you stay on this side because the computer has the results on it. So I just So stay in front of the desk.
Yeah.
I'm still happy to hear your answers, but in front of the desk.
yeah, so to me, it's like the differing styles, honestly, is like one of them. Like, just seeing like how someone from like BC would do, like, I know this is like outside of the case, but just like not only the etiquette, but like the way of thinking, I think was just interesting.
Also the organization.
Are you talking about the case specifically? Like the ideas we had?
It really just is about the vibe of the match and how you felt, how the room was, and because it's an artistic representation of conversation, so it's really hard to do it in a technical sense. You just sort of have to go with how it felt and go from there. So you really felt like it was
Like a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Like they speak very like I like that. Like it's good that like the youth are like optimistic. And I know like when we first like looked at this case, it was like, oh like poor like I don't know. It's like really like we were not gonna pick this case even if we were got if we got.
Well, you like the other one more.
We thought it was really difficult to balance like the farmers and like we felt bad. Like we felt pessimistic. We felt like okay like it has to be done. Like they have to like do these pandemic measures, but like it really sucks for the farmers. So like we came at like we just thought it was like a really depressing case, but like it's good that like they had hope for it.
I felt that it was a matter of articulation, but then also building ideas that can then be applied and evaluated by all these different experts we had in the room. I felt that we had some great conversations in terms of recognizing different people's dignities and duties, what they hope for, and what they want, especially on your side as well, recognizing like honesty and truthfulness within specifically vaccines in terms of building specific relationships. I mean, we talked a little bit about like general kind of bigger groups, whereas you focus mainly on individuals and
that was
light within our kind of questions as well.
Yeah, that was cool. I'm not like really. We're not so theoretical. I mean, it's good you guys are, but it's like it's hard for me to understand a lot of the stuff when you say like. Sorry.
The Brit Consortium.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's just on terms of like what we all agree on and what we're kind of all looking for.
You have it on.
Kind of consensus. Yeah, I know. Really great match.
It was really. You guys were really close.
We had a rocky start.
Yeah, so like I said, anything to do with the vaccines and so what we had
Well, yeah, when you wrote the case, we kind of focused on like balance and like civic food and like but like the case is really geared towards like vaccines. Like, what were you kind of thinking was the most fun on? Did you agree with us that was like the most fun on the case?
really difficult is that there's so many different factors.
We also, like, one thing that we argued about a while was, like,
All right, teams, we can take our seats, please.
Sorry.
for like an hour. We were looking for like 5 hours.
He thought we didn't have to tell strangers. Like,
Yeah, I actually also wanted to help.
I'd be happy to stay and hear more.
Yeah, I think that we'll have to stay around a little more because there is the questions for the artists that we definitely do want to get, we want to get answers to them so that we can get really the best picture and representation of this match that we can. All right. Thank you, teams, for an incredible match on both sides. There are absolutely things that I will be taking with me and thinking about now as I move forward as a voting member of society and as just a member of society in general. However, we have come to a result, and today the conclusion is that we have a winner on the northern secondary side. Congratulations, team.
Vote.
Sorry.
You guys are going to be back.
Are you allowed to post the judge vote?
I don't think so. That would be up to their discretion.
It does, that just depends, like, that's what decides if you're there. We'll just have to. Thank you. Great job. Yeah, you guys did good. I thought it was going to be a tie.
All right, so the next question that I've got for the artist here is, what did you guys feel was really a memorable moment in the case, or what section did you guys find that the discussion was maybe deeper or more impactful than?
I think always the judge questions add a new layer because it just adds for clarifications within your case, right? Like
Yeah.
generally, we always believe that like caveats are like the death of a case, to a degree, right? The caveats are
extensions and caveats.
right.
Like it's always the like, but what about this? And it
Yeah.
completely dismantles.
It's not only that, like the correct result for an ethics case like this would be, you know, an answer with a million different caveats, right? And it adds a lot to the case, but honestly, it's not the best way to present it because you only have 5 minutes for your presentation. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Distributed learning. What did you guys feel was like a very impactful moment or something that was really like a part of the ground? The whole challenge.
I can tell you I have the result for next one.
I think what I wanted to say is that common
something that
One of them, I sent all my practical and
that needs to be in the mix of how things coordinated and how we should big picture, right? That's and something I giving out less and less is that now teams are being very focused on the information and less on the examples of practice. I think that was why
If we needed them to do it, because we have 2 or 2 1-on-1s, and then tie against the
Right, yeah. It was interesting to see the competition as it grows and changes because it was always really that we were asked to just be straight up with our information but yeah. And then for these cases in specific, had discussion throughout yourselves. Did you guys, how did you feel when discussing these issues? Were you divided? Did you really feel like you were unifying a set of cases for you?
Oh wait, guys, let's get feedback.
Congratulations again. I hope you have a little time to celebrate.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Do you have our feedback sheet? Sorry.
No, I was another group before this judging.
Okay, so you'll get 2 for this round, but the second one's on its way.
Yeah, no, it does. I said somebody's very involved. This is my first time working with this too, so I don't really quite know their experience.
Sorry, we've been talking so much that I haven't had a chance to actually write down anything.
And there's no clear, if one person did all the talking, that's fine, you can get judged on that, but
Yeah. So, and I saw your hand go up a couple times. It's like,
I find control your body language. Having watched 2 of your matches now, you need to stop putting Ethan on the end. It seems to be a thing of like, he's on the end, so we just go through the row and then Ethan never happens. So it's happened a couple times that Ethan's like, please, please.
Oh, but it's collective fun.
Oh yeah. No. Even with that one.
oh yeah?
All right. We gotta go brush to
Wait, I'm waiting.
make final review. Can you write the whole thing? All right, let's go.
Ethan, we need to see that.
Am I giving this to you?
Yes, that would be great.
Are the feedback forms ready?
No, but we can provide feedback in person if that would be helpful. Sorry, we haven't had a chance.
Oh, that's okay. It's no problem.
I'm so sorry. We've been having conversations.
because you know, you have the rubric, right?
I don't like
Have you ever seen the judges?
Yeah, this is my very first competition, so.
So you know what we're marking on, so that judge's question off the top is really important. You make sure you're answering that thoroughly, systematically.
That's what we try to do.
Yeah, and I think you do, but that piece is something you have to do. Pay attention to that rubric, and I think you have. So, good job, move on.
Yeah, I would say I did write stuff for you. It's pretty not great, but what I will say in terms of points that I would emphasize is really focus on the opposing views and how they're actually integrated into your thinking and getting to the kind of final presentation of your point of your argument, because I think that still isn't fleshed out or clear. It's kind of like and it's like a firing squad of like, this is what we think, these are some intentions, and it's almost like that part is like skipped over a little bit, and I would love for it to be more meaty and richer.
So if you want to see kind of the flow of how they like flash.
I want your thought process, continuity, how they build on each other.
Yeah, and there is really, so when I competed, we found that the best structure was almost to put the case together like an essay. Was to choose, to choose a team captain or a case lead who will then do really general, broad research on a lot of different things, and have them present an opening statement almost, and then have your other 4 people get more niche research onto littler subjects and present it as an essay where you do an opening statement, and then you do statement with the 4 other people, and then you really, if you know who's going to be talking about what, and you pre-plan it almost like writing an essay, then you end up with issues through it. And so Ethics Bowl, it was my team. Like, I didn't have a sport. I've never been a sporty person, but that was my team. We did the competitions, and then we went to nationals, so it was my team, and we were good at it. And so it was really something that and it's just the content of the competition and everything that I really love so much. And so it really is a joy to
Light blue. Light blue. You didn't get a single.
Why does a train get tired? Why? It runs out of steam. Give me a G on that. Give me a G on that. It's a good joke.
Yo, Ari.
Fine, we just have to pay more attention. We do have to.
I think if I do the judge questions, you're gonna have to.
I know, but it was like, you can't just like ignore something. And they literally point from thirds of them. The only two that give feedback literally pointed out that we. No, actually, they all told us that. They all told us that we should be doing it, not that. I'm good, yeah.
I don't think we have the,
Like we test, they're like, don't test for us to share with us.
Let me check. I didn't check. Yes, I understand.
Wait, so what's first? Not a,
yeah, I wouldn't think it would be.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Stressed.
Oh, don't be stressed.
Yeah, well,
You got it
it's good to
covered.
have gone this far.
I wonder if
I can tell you. Collective punishment. Yeah, I think it's 9 and 10. So what kind?
I'm just curious which one is 9 and which one is 10.
Yeah. Okay. 10 is collective punishment, and 9 is peace. Fighting for peace.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Whoever knows.
well, I can request access. Yeah, it's always, oh, no, I don't have anything.
Okay. Hi, Bree. Hello. How are you? Good. Very well, thanks. We're excited. Yes. So are you just 3 or are you expecting more? It is 3. Okay. Paper? Yes. I didn't even think I was still.
You guys remember at Rob's when we were taking a funny picture? You have found it now?
No. What was the hippo thing? Oh, Moto. I didn't remember that.
I don't know. I never forget a tune.
Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
So I just thought of you.
Should be here. Okay.
Thank you. Can I have a third? Yeah. We shared the word. Yeah.
Click is the nicest.
That's a good one. No, lame. That's crispy. I think it might be this one. I like that one. It has like a little bit of a rattliness. It's like higher they're like not like that though. They're not like metallic and like this is a mix of metallic and matte, and then you've also got this like nice lettering on the front. But with Loretto Abbey, it's like a big plastic.
No, I think it's